Join me in today's video while we take a trip back in time, upcycling some small furniture pieces. It's been quite some time since I've seen these makeovers, and there are still a ton of tips and tricks for you to be able to use for your next project. When I seen this on the Facebook Marketplace, I had to have this piece. It was unique. It did not look like a typical side table, and I knew I could just turn it into something amazing. However, this was one of the first like 5 to 10 things I had ever flipped in my life, and it had a ton of things I needed to fix. So I was a little intimidated to start out with this. When I started flipping furniture as my side hustle, I hadn't really had anything that was this rickety and broken and gappy. And I was like, oh, I might have my work cut out for me here. And as you can see by all the things I'm pointing out, I had a good reason to be a little intimidated. I always love to look over any thrifted pieces that I get are secondhand just to see what work we have to cut out for us. Because when you are reselling these pieces, it's important to make sure that your pieces are put together very well. This was my first time ever using this DAP plastic wood X, and I will tell you, it was my last time. Well, at least my last time using it on anything that I had to stain, because as you will see soon, it does not stain. And having filler that stains is really important when you have things you have to fix, especially on the top of something. I took some wood glue. This is my favorite wood glue. I still use it till this day, and I put it everywhere I could put it. I smooshed it everywhere. And then once I had it smooshed everywhere, I flipped the table upside down and I took a 40-pound bag of coal and I put it on top of the table, well, on the bottom, on the top of the table to apply pressure. See my little Jimmy rigged up project here, and let it dry for 24 hours. Once it was dry, I then took my Ryobi sander and I sanded down the top. Whenever you're sanding a piece, it's always important to start with a higher grit, around 120 to 150, and then you go up to make it smoother as you go, especially when you're kind of ripping off a stain if you're not going to use a stripper. Once you get it all sanded down, you're going to want to bring in the leaf blower. I can feel the judgment using my leaf blower. Listen, it works really well, okay, to get that extra dust off. You can't have that on there. I did flip the bottom over and do the bottom as well. And then look at this. What is that? I still don't know. Back in the day, I used to use crude cutter. I can't remember. You guys used to tell me what it is. We're going to call it crud cutter. And cleaned it off. I used this stuff a lot before I discovered my Dixie Belle's Lightning. But this stuff works just as good. It doesn't have, Dixie Belle stuff doesn't really have that much of a smell. This stuff does. Once I taped off where I sanded, I then sprayed this Rust-Oleum primer. I will tell you that you should make sure that you're priming your pieces so you don't have tannus. I talk about that often in here probably and in general with my new videos, because it will stain your pieces and show through lighter colors. If I can spray paint it, I will spray paint it, people. I love to spray paint, and especially when you have stuff like this, it is super fast and efficient versus hand brushing anything. I was going for a farmhouse look, and I distressed it just by sanding down some of the edges to bring out some of that wood. If you want it to be black underneath, just do a coat of the matte black spray paint and then go over it with white. I like the natural color of the wood, especially when it's a color like this. It still looks amazing. One of my favorite things to do on this channel is to create my own stain art, and you can do that simply by adding a little bit of acrylic paint to some water. And the depth of the color really depends on how much color you apply to the water and what colors you apply to the water. For this particular piece, I decided to create my own stain color for the entire top. And this was the point that I noticed this little dot. You see that dot? Where the stain is not taking to the wood filler. I had hoped after I got this on here and I did a couple layers and I was doing a grayish on the top. This was the first coat I did this brown, that it would start to turn. Because there were a ton of little holes. Look at this. Ton of little holes little dots that I filled with that wood filler, and it never ever did, but it turned out okay in the end. For the second color, I'm just taking a little bit of gray and adding it to water and then going over the whole top. Be mindful, the brushes, I still have this problem. I will tell you that this table is actually at my parents' house. My dad loved it so much. It is over there and it's still stunning and in beautiful shape. But yeah, here's me pointing out that even with the gray on there, the holes are still coming through. Once the gray was completely dry, I did one more coat of the brown and then I left it alone to dry again and realized I was completely happy with how that turned out. Look at this. So beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. You cannot compare custom stains to regular stains. It's stunning. I got this stencil off of Amazon. I cannot make this stuff up. I just got these brand new stencil brushes, and as I'm trying to pull the stencil brush out of the pack, look at that. It never ceases to amaze me going back through all this footage and compiling this video together how I still have the craziest things happen to me. I named the channel right. That's all I'm saying. I named the channel right. Of course, use whatever stenciling technique makes you fuzzy inside. I use a stippling technique for this. It gives me a faded. I'm a huge fan of like making sure your stencil's kind of faded. It doesn't have to be real prominent when I'm doing certain things. And if you have like half of your stencil wet, you can always see how I put some paper underneath the other side to make sure that it doesn't get on your project. And then I just sealed it with some poly. I love this little round side table I picked up. Anytime I can pick up little tables, I grab them little suckers because I just like doing unique artsy things to them. I clean the piece off using my crud cutter, and then I keep forgetting to mention, make sure you're going over them with a wet paper towel to get that chemical cleaner off. You do not want that in between your piece and your paint. I noticed there was some cracking and some, I don't know, some little tiny baby scratches. It wasn't serious, but I did feel like, let me get some sandpaper and wrap it around my little block I have here. So I'm just taking 150 grit and just going over the top. I'm not going over the whole piece for, you know, I'm not doing it. Okay, we're not doing it. So we're just going over the top. And then we're going to wipe down any excess with just a little bit of water so we don't get that in our paint. We are going to create a raised stencil look on this, and I'm going to use some joint compound and mix that up with some of my paint that I'm going to be using to paint the piece. I printed this stencil out with my Cricut. You guys can use whatever you want. This is what I'm using, and I'm just going to fill in each one of these holes.
Why did I stay? I should be leaving. Hear what I say without even speaking. My compass is off, why did I choose you? I'm just too lost, I need to cut loose. I keep it in my head, I keep it locked away. My friends think that this is over. Guess it's the price I pay. Played with the enemy, now I got you on my shoulders. Let go and let me love, let me let go and let me love. Let me let go and let me love, let me let go and let me love again. Let go and let me love, let me let go and let me love. Let me let go and let me love again. Let me love again.
Let go and let me love, let me let go and let me love, let me love again. Let go and let me love, let me let go and let me love again.
Wanna let go, I wanna lose you. Fall out of love as you're supposed to. This was a phase that I was was a mistake.
I let the piece dry overnight and wanted to just show y'all, like, as I'm scratching and I'm rubbing, like how well a little bit of sanding and then add your joint compound and it's really stuck on the piece. Like, it's really on there really well. I'm pretty sure this piece is going to bleed all over the place. So to make sure that that doesn't happen, I'm going to use this Boss from Dixie Belle. Usually to prep my piece when I put on like a primer type thing, I use Kills, and if you've watched any of my other videos, I'm pretty sure in one of them, like I had to toss paintbrush out. This stuff is so smooth, there's no smell to it. It was dry in like an hour, probably less if I paid attention. It was just amazing. And I'm going to use these two light colors, a drop cloth and a cotton. I am selling this piece, so I want to make sure that it's in colors that people are going to want to purchase and not, you know, farmhouse and boho is kind of in right now.
It's like talking to a wall when you don't look at me. I wanna speak my mind and tell you how I feel. It's like talking to a wall when you don't look at me. Please just look at me. I'm a ticking time bomb that goes off easily. You always know which buttons you should push, baby. I'm a ticking time bomb that goes off easily, but you're still here with me. We're drawn to each other. We try to break it off, but we return to each other. You're the best bad thing that has happened to me.
I really wanted all the pieces to just kind of blend together, like, you know, have some farmhouse, some boho with the cream, and, you know, I was trying to, you know, blend it all together, make sure it was, you know, a blended mess. Listen, I was being artsy, and that's where I'm rolling with it. We were artsy. Just watch my artisticness flow. If you don't like it, you know, you ain't gotta hang out, but you might hurt my feelings if you leave. Anyhow, okay, back to this. Okay, I gotta be honest, if I'm being 100 with y'all, once I started this antique Waverly wax, it really started going downhill. I knew that I wanted these points to stick out. What I didn't know was how many layers it was going to take me. So I started with antique Waverly wax and started rubbing it in, and then switching to the Rust-Oleum metallic. Pearl white is what I used. I don't have a picture of that. I'm sorry. Don't hate me. Went back and forth, adding layers, and just did not love it. I'm like, there's something going on here. Finally, after about another, I think I did 3 full layers of antique Waverly wax and 2 with a pearl, I really started liking it coming together, and then took my chippy brush with some of the cotton very lightly and dry brushed the entire piece so it all blended together. I took the easy peasy spray wax, not with a cloth because it started falling apart on me in the project. Don't even go there. I used a brush and love it. Seriously be one of the most disgustingly dirty pieces I have ever picked up to flip. And look at that. I know it's just filled with spider babies. I would love to know what shed or attic or garage this thing crawled out of, because just ew. There was bugs in it, there was spider webs, there were babies ready to emerge. It was just a hot mess. I wasn't taking no chances with this one, people, so I made sure to PPE up. And I recommend you do too if you come across a piece like that. Handle your business. There was so much crap still caked in these corners even after I wiped everything down. So I had to bust out my toothpicks and the paper towels and use my little trick to get in them little crevices, just roll it around the tip and dunk it in soapy warm water and get all them crusty bits out. I should have did this step beforehand, but I was like scared to touch this thing. So I'm doing it after I cleaned it all off and removing all the hardware. This step probably isn't really necessary because I'm using chalk paint and it will cover over these scratches, but I decided to take 120 grit sandpaper and just kind of smooth everything out. And there were these weird holes on the bottom and I decided to smooth them out too. Before I start painting, I am going to apply this stain blocker to prevent against any tannins because it looks like that kind of wood that is going to give me that problem. I don't want to have to go back over this, so I am just going to do this step now. And it's like piling snow down outside, so it's just not the best time for me to be doing this outside or inside, but I'm trying to do this in my patio and hopefully it works out when it's all dry. Hopefully it might take a while to dry, but I hope it works out. Once that dried, I took this flat black spray paint and went over the hardware with it. And then I'm going to apply a coat to the drawer and the very top of the shelf because it has like these little decorative detailed lines and I plan on kind of sanding that out later. And of course, I done smudged it. There was a little run. I'm trying to save it. Oh. I just couldn't have left that front there. This is the chalk paint that I'm going to use, and I applied 2 coats to this shelf. Really like the look of this little knob, so I decided to just paint it black and seal it with a Mod Podge. Since I'm probably only going to sell this for around $30, I also didn't want to invest too much more into the project. Now it's pouring buckets of snow outside, people, so I was not trying to set up shop outside and record. So I took this little shelf out there and used this 400 grit sandpaper and just buffed it to where this little decorative piece came out. And then I took the shelf itself outside and did the same thing to this section. And of course I'm extra, so we're gonna add us a little stencil. I did tape off the bottom to kind of give it more of like a triangle look instead of like a diamond shape. And then I'm just using, I'm sure you guys have seen this little makeup sponge, and we're blotting it on there. I really wanted to leave this plain, but I couldn't bring myself to do it because then I thought to myself, we're going to put some contact paper inside the drawer and give it even more extra. So I had this and I figure let's cut it down first. Which, don't let the camera trick fool you, it took me some time. I didn't think you guys needed to see me struggle with that, but I'll tell you about it. It was not easy. It took me a good 20 minutes to cut this little tiny piece of paper down. Patience is key here. And then finally, I just gently pressed it in there to smooth out all the little edges. And when I got to the very end, I still had a little bit of hangover, so I used this little X-Acto knife to get it in there precisely, and it turned out pretty good. And I was really happy with this little add-on. As of this moment, this is my favorite protective finish. I just slapped one coat on here and I really loved how this turned out. Let me know what you guys think. This beautiful vintage mirrored shadow box shelf was my grandmother's. My dad's mom had this on her wall all year long, and I love to go over every season and see how she would decorate it. My dad decided, and this was about 5 years ago, that he wanted to incorporate it into his home, so I did an amazing job upcycling it, and it's still hanging in their home today, and I'll share a picture of that at the end. Of course, I'm going to take a moment to see what I have gotten myself into with this piece. I really just noticed a lot of dust and some tape. She had a bunch of tape on here in different spots, probably to hold the lights up or the garland. And this poor piece of styrofoam, that thing, ooh, it needs to be retired. You've done your job. You've done your job, buddy. I don't know what this orange stuff is or brown stuff. It's hard. I don't know what it is. It's crusty. We're going to get it off of there. Then I noticed there are some stains we're going to have to address. It's on the top and the bottom. But for the most part, that was really it with this piece. Since this piece was so old, I didn't want to just jump right in with my crew cutter and felt, let's start off by cleaning this with just some soap and water.
Oops.
There are several ways you could block the mirrors off, so I'm going to use the paper towels, and if a little bit gets through the paper towels, I'll deal with that aftermath. Anyhow, when I was done trimming them to size to cover the mirrors, I just used some painter's tape to cover the rest of the mirrors up, and then an X-Acto knife to get those precise little cuts, and if I messed up at all, I just snipped some painter's tape into the tiny little grooves. But this actually took me about an hour to really get this completely taped off. But it turned out so good. I did such a good job. Before you start painting anything that has stains on it, that you know for sure has stains on it, you definitely want to put a stain blocker on it. I let this sit about 2 hours and then brought it in and noticed this. It's a little crusty spot. So I took a toothpick, wet a paper towel, twirled it on up in there, and stuck it in a hole. And got all that gunk out of there. The paint I'm using is rather thick. I would add some fluid to it, but figured there are many dimensions with this shadow box, and I might just want to try and do this without thinning out the paint. And as long as I'm mindful with my brush strokes, I should have minimal ones in the end finish. Sometimes pieces can have really close sections and you'll get globs of paint. A little tip is to just take a piece of paper and slice it right through. Alright, who is ready to see how well I did with trimming all of this off and how many touch-ups we are going to have to do?
Oh no.
Since I'm gonna have to touch up the mirror pieces anyway, I figured let me get more paint on the mirror if I have to and freehand and wing these edges in here. But I actually did a pretty amazing job just cutting in there. Yep, that's right, tooting my own horn there. Deal with it. Sorry about that. Anyhow, this little razor, I can't think of the name of it at the moment, but it scrapes the glass, look at that, and it's getting the paint off, and it's also making sure the edges are nice and crisp where they all meet in together with the mirror and the wood. And I don't know why the camera's getting fuzzy. Viewers don't like fuzzy. Why is it getting fuzzy? I don't know. It did that in one of my other videos. I'm gonna have to look into that. When I was all done, I took just a piece of cloth and went all along the edges and got all the crusty bits and put them towards the center of the mirror so that way I could tell if there was anything else I needed to touch up, and then went back in with the paintbrush. And then finally I called in the big guns. The vacuum is definitely the best way to go when you have pockets in your projects to get stuff out. Do you see this residue like on the mirror? I am using hot water and vinegar. That's it. Hot water and vinegar to scrub this mirror. I see people use chemicals and all kinds of crazy things to make sure they don't have whatever on them. I don't understand it. Hot water and vinegar, and then I'll dry paper towel, and look how nice and clean this mirror is. To this day, the piece is still one of the most tedious upcycles I have ever done. Absolutely worth it. It is stunning, and even currently hanging in my parents' house, it's in amazing condition. And I'm excited that one day I will own this piece and keep it in my home. This little circular side table was in amazing condition. It needed a bath though, so I did take some of my crud cutter and give it a nice cleaning and made sure to wipe off the excess with just some water. Stripping pieces that have this shiny sealer over them can be a pain, but you can cut a few corners by taking some sandpaper and giving it a nice scuffing. It's especially important in sections you want to lay clay. I took and put some of these Prima molds with some wood glue. I did sand down the wood as you've seen first, and then use some painter's tape to just hold this on. You don't have to press it tight, you press it easy. And then off camera, I took some wood filler and put in the corners on the side. This bin primer is not my favorite, but it's what I had on hand, so that's what I used to do a layer of primer. And then while that was waiting, I took some of calcium carbonate, joint compound, and mixed the Dixie Belle paint up to get a textured effect in with this paint. This is what the mixture looks like with the joint compound, the calcium carbonate, and the Dixie Belle paint. I started off by just smooshing the paint in these creases around the mold. I wanted it to look cohesive, so that really made the pieces blend together, and started tapping this all over the place. The idea behind this piece was for it to look like a stone piece that it had been just like sitting out in some old garden for like ever, and I hope I accomplished that look. You'll have to let me know. Now here comes me sharing some spray paint, because I didn't in the beginning, but now we're going to, for those of you who love some spray paint. And this was so hard for me to not spray paint the whole piece, because I wanted some of that beautiful color of the Dixie Belle paint to show through just slightly. And look how it just enhances the legs. So pretty. This is where I had to walk away. I know what you're thinking, Brandy. Are you putting chalk paint on top of the spray paint? Yes, I am. Okay. If you wait for the spray paint to completely dry, it's not going to peel back off, and you can create a beautiful little whitewash look on top of here. It is tedious and it is painstaking, and yeah, but listen, I did it. It's over with. And oh my gosh, this was my last napkin. So in this set, I was so nervous about messing it up, and oh my gosh, it did not go the way I had planned. I had to walk away from this table several times with this blending process, because you have to wait for this Waverly wax to dry before you apply something else with it. If not, it just starts smearing weird. I don't know. Listen, when you don't have anything to dry, you use whatever. It doesn't matter that it's a piece of decor sitting near you. You just fan it dry. Do what works, whatever works. Gotta do what you gotta do. I kept on alternating between the chalk paint and the antique Waverly wax, and think it turned out okay. This piece sold almost immediately when I popped it up on Facebook Marketplace. And all these years later, looking back at the footage, I was so hard on myself, because even now, the tabletop, that napkin, the finish, I did a really, really amazing job. What do you guys think? If you're interested in seeing more furniture upcycles I've done, check out this unicorn spit stain piece right here. And as always, people, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Until next time.